fast is the mitochondrial DNA mutating generation to generation, work that backwards. Okay, but then they added in what I call an evolutionary time frame. In other words, it really was a fudge factor. They made the assumption, well, we split from primates, we split from chimpanzees evolutionarily some 6 million years ago. So they then included in this study, being good evolutionists, they included in this study chimpanzee mitochondrial DNA also to get their data to get the age to declare that mitochondrial Eve lived, give or take, 150,000 years ago. So when this came out, creationists were very excited about the idea that we have genetic confirmation confirming that Eve in the Bible is in fact the mother of all mankind, just as the Bible says. But to the young Earth creationists such as myself, this then was a challenge. Well, but she lived 150,000 years ago, and that's not according to young Earth position. As Paul Harvey would say, the rest of the story. If you eliminate the chimpanzee mitochondrial DNA, which had no business in there to begin with, that's just evolutionary supposition. Okay, go to the real data, not the evolutionary supposition, not the evolutionary fudge factors. If you eliminate that and you look just at the mutation rate of the mitochondrial DNA from mother to offspring, it was 20 times faster than the mutation rate that they had in their calculations. So even using their data, okay, this isn't even creationist data, using their data based on the actual mutation rate data, mitochondrial Eve lived 7,500 years ago. Now, why did they put the evolutionary fudge factor in? Because they knew that. That's why. And in 1998, in an article in Science, which is very anti-creation, I assure you, the journal Science is very anti-creation. In this article, they said, well, you know, we got a problem here because if we really do it right, Eve's only 6,000 years old, and that can't be. So obviously, we got to redo the whole mitochondrial clock. And ultimately, what their solution has been is they throw it out. It must be wrong because we know Eve can't be 6,000 years old. Now, let's put some creationist input into this. In 2007, in the journal Nucleic Acid Research, Rob Carter, which I guess you had here as a speaker, I don't know if he talked some about, I assume he talked some about this. In 2007, he published a paper where he has done his own work at determining the original sequence of Eve, as opposed to what the 1987 paper did. Much different sequence, much, much more accurate. I say to 99.99% of the original Eve sequence, he'll probably tell you it's even more accurate than that. I think he'll say it's 99.9999% to the original. We have down to probably 6 or 7 nucleotides of the original sequence of Eve. That's how accurate we think we can get it now. 6 or 7. Okay, so a much more accurate. And by the way, Nucleic Acid Research, it's not an evolutionist journal. It's a very, very respected DNA journal. They looked at his work. They said, it looks good to us. They published it. This is now the gold standard of Eve sequence, done by a creationist. But of course, we know creationists, they don't do science. Okay, using a much, much more accurate sequence of the original mitochondrial Eve DNA, making again the assumption, as both the Bible and the genetics seem to point out, that all mitochondria in the whole human population came from one woman. Okay? All existing variation, the difference between my mitochondrial DNA and your mitochondrial DNA, is strictly a result of mutations that have entered in since that one woman, okay? We can then do a mutation count. Well, what's the rate that these mutations are introduced into the human population? Okay? We now can say, all right, on average, there's less than 40 mutations per person from the original sequence. We don't all have the same mutations, but on average, you have 40 or less mutation differences than Eve did. I have 40 or less mutational differences than Eve did. I don't have the same ones necessarily, but how close we're related. Okay, I don't necessarily have the same ones, but we on average have 40 or less mutational differences than Eve. Okay, we calculate then, it looks like we have a 1 mutation per 10 generations based on this new mitochondrial Eve sequence, much more accurate than anything been used before. Okay, 1 mutation per 10 generations. So what that means is that the human race has done no more than 400 generations. Eve is no older than 8,000 years. That is genetic data. It's not fundamentalist Bible thumping. It's not just pie in the sky. This is, wild-eyed claim. That is solid genetic data. This is the best genetic data that anyone in the world has at the moment of the age of Eve, 8,000 years. How's that for nice support of what the Bible has said all along? So, I haven't begun to talk everything, obviously, about the human genome. I thank you very much for your patience as we've been a little bit longer trying to explain some things. When we come to human evolution, this is what you see in the textbooks. This is what I talk about all the time. Look at this nice progression. See how this works, blah, 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 blah. Remember that the genome is decaying. One of the things I meant to mention, the geologists can talk all they want about their radioactive decay, and they can talk all they want about this method showing the Earth old, this method showing the Earth old. Well, that's fine, but there wasn't any living creatures because they couldn't live that long. So the genetic data is in direct conflict with their claims of the geologic data. And you know what? The genetic data is an interpretation of intricate design. Easy for us to see and understand the design in that. Geologic data is an interpretation of a chaotic mess. Very easy to misinterpret. So as a scientist, and this will show my partiality, but I still say as a scientist, which am I going to say is more likely giving you the correct interpretation? The genetic data, which is an interpretation of very clear fundamental design, or the geologic data, which is just a catastrophic event very easily misunderstood, and we can impose almost any theory onto it we want. So when the genetic data and the geologic data stand in direct conflict, I know which one I'm going to say supports. Now, I don't really believe the geologic data does stand in direct conflict, but what I'm saying is they can talk all they want about this proves the Earth old, this proves the Earth old, this proves the Earth. Well, maybe the Earth is old, but there was no living forms on it because the DNA wouldn't have lasted that long. Because the DNA says that life on this planet is just a few thousand years old. And that you can take to the bank. So, what we have is, instead of all this evidence of this nice progression to talk about, the evidence is the man has always been man. And he hadn't been here that many thousands of years. That's the genetic evidence. Everything else is just extrapolation, supposition, and wishful thinking. So this is where the genetic evidence leads you, not the nice human evolutionary claims. So with that, thank you very much.